Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel, it's just me. I don't know where Valentino is, and Dave's got sick kids, so I did the sick kid thing yesterday and the day before. Anyway, I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. I'm launching a new service called Ruby Geniuses. I'll talk about in the picks. We have a special guest this week, and that is Jorge Manrubia.
Manrubia. That's good. Manrubia.
Sorry, I speak Italian, not Spanish, but anyway, you want to introduce yourself real quick and let people know who you are? And
Sure. So, I'm Jorge, a Spanish programmer who lives in Valencia, Spain. I work at 37 Signal, a lead programmer. I'm the main author behind the Active Record Encryption, which was introduced in Rails 7, and I'm also like to write all sorts of topics, Rails included. So I'm writing a series of blog posts called Code I Like, the 37 Signals blog site. Anyone can check if you're interested. And recently, I've been involved in creating a new feature that we have released in the upcoming Turbo 8 version, which is page refreshes, which I think I'm going to talk about today.
yeah, we're going to talk about Turbo for sure. I think you gave a talk on this at Rails World, if I remember right.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. We presented this idea there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it was also one of the things, or some part of it, maybe it was just Turbo Frames, I want to say, that DHH talked about in his keynote. But
No. Well, turbo frames were already there. So
okay,
turbo frames and turbo stream actions were like introduced when Hotwire was released in 2021.
Okay.
I think it was around that time, or 2020. Um, so Hotwire got a new major revision of Turbo, and they introduced Turbo frames and Turbo stream actions there. And now in this new version we are shipping, it has some other major features, including this concept that we presented there in Rails World, which is the page refreshes with morphing thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
David, what David presented in his keynote, he showed like many things, and one of the new things was page refreshes
Okay.
with morphing. Yeah.
Right, and that was where essentially he had like a Kanban board or something, and when you added a new
Yeah.
column, it didn't jitter up to the top. So
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Hi.
looks like we got Valentino here, so he can say smart things about Turbo. So yeah, I have to admit I haven't used Turbo a whole bunch. We can hear Valentino moving everything around on his desk.
All right. All right. Now that happened.
So can you kind of give us the 10,000-foot view of what Turbo is and how it works, and then we'll dive into some of this stuff?
Sure. So Turbo is a front-end library. So it's a library that you can use to build the user interface of your application. And Turbo, without getting into the specifics, it has philosophy of progressive enhancement on how the web works. So the idea of Turbo is respecting how the web works, in the sense the HTTP protocol to interchange HTML documents with a server. Like that's the basic proposal of the web. So it enhances that by on the one hand offering that programming model for the most part to you as a programmer, and internally under the hood doing all sorts of tricks to get faster response times and a better overall experience. So that's the whole proposal of Turbo. And to do that, it has several features and several. It's like an umbrella. Well,
Uh-huh.
Hotwire is like an umbrella that covers different frameworks and libraries to achieve that.
Right.
But that's the idea. Yeah.
Right. So I think back in the day, the old timers will remember turbo links, and
Mm.
turbo links effectively sped up your you'd add it to your app, and you'd click a link and it would just reload the parts of your page that changed, basically, was
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
nutshell how it worked.
Yeah, TurboLinks was released in 2012, I think, or
Mhm.
2013, and it was based on Bjax, which was a library from GitHub,
Yeah.
uh, who was the one that took this concept of this the idea I was talking about. It was like using a new API back then, which was the um, push state API from the web, where you can manipulate
Mhm.
the browser history and the URL like programmatically. So it
Right.
combined that with doing a trick when loading new HTML documents, which consists in not replacing the head section of the page, leaving the head section of the page untouched, and replacing the body of the page. So by
Right.
doing that, it saves the computing time it takes to reprocess the CSS and the JavaScript, and it's really
Mhm.
noticeable. I mean, you essentially for free you get like a much faster response time, and that was in Turbo Links, but today Turbo uh, so the current version of Turbo still has that mechanism as the default. So that's what you
Right.
get that's the default in Turbo. You get that and you use that all the time. Actually, it's a wonderful default. And I think it's underrated because many people don't use it because they think it's not fast enough, but it's absolutely fast enough and the most productive. It offers the most productive programming model. So it's a great point. But TurboLinks is still like what we are doing right now in Turbo. So we are still doing
Right.
that.
You've just gotten a little more sophisticated about it so that
Yeah.
I can say, "Hey, do this," like click a link or submit a form or whatever, and it says, "Okay, now I'm smart enough to know that I just need to replace this little piece."
Yeah. Yeah. This is part of what we are introducing now in Turbo 8. So until
Uh-huh.
now, that was like the default. Okay. Until just to complete the Hotwire picture, until now, you had like that default from Turbo Links, which was what you got without using any API, just by clicking links and submitting forms. You had that
Uh-huh.
body replacement behavior.
Right.
But then in Hotwire, uh, uh, we introduced two new things. Um, One is turbo frames, and the other one are turbo stream action. Okay, so
Okay.
turbo frames is it's a new API so that you can declare in your views. So when you are composing your HTML, you can define regions, turbo frames. They are called turbo frames. They have like
Mhm.
its own tag, turbo frame. So in those regions, you can define navigation contexts. So that, for example, if you click on a link inside those frames, the request goes to the server. When it comes back, Turbo knows that it has to replace that Turbo frame identified by
Mhm.
its ID. That's one of the examples. So it defines
Right.
like regions in the screen that you can replace, um, so that you as a programmer don't have to care about the JavaScript that updates a specific region of the place because the framework does that for you by matching IDs. Those are turbo frames. And then you have turbo stream action, which are like, it's like an evolution of the JavaScript RJS templates from JavaScript,
Mhm.
where you responded with JavaScript code that got executed to perform, I don't know, DOM
Oh, the
replacement
good
or
old
DOM
days.
manipulation. Yeah, like in the good old days, it's like an evolution of that. Instead of rendering JavaScript, what you do is to render some special HTML tags, which are TurboStream actions, that
Mhm.
when they get connected to the DOM, um, they execute certain JavaScript based on the stream action, based on the properties in the markup. So, for example, you have like a replace stream action. So you uh, render that replace tag with an ID and when it runs, it's going to execute that replace in the browser. So it's like a declarative way of executing arbitrary JavaScript. So those are turbo stream actions.
Hmm.
So until now, those were the three mechanisms we had: the default, body replacement, turbo stream actions, and turbo frames. And now we are introducing this page refresh concept. Okay, so this page refresh concept means that um, when you perform an operation in your web application that implies reloading the current page you are in again. So, for example, you
Hmm.
submit a form and get a redirect back to the current screen. It's going to trigger a page refresh internally. So we call that page refresh. And now you can configure how to handle those page refreshes. Okay. So by default, the default turbo behavior so far is to replace the body of the page as always, and to reset the scroll of the page. Okay. So
Right.
you reset the scroll vertically and horizontally. And now what with a new we let you configure a new option, which is it's going to use morphing instead of a body replacement. It's going to use morphing. It's going to morph the existing body of the page into the new body of the new HTML
Oh,
document.
okay.
And we can talk about what morphing is later if you want. But on top of that, it's going to prevent the reset that Turbo does by default. So it's going to keep the scroll in place. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So the concept of morphing is an interesting one. Morphing is that morphing is about, instead of replacing one DOM tree with another, it's going to some algorithm in the browser, some library. We are using idiomorph. The library we use under the hood is idiomorph. So
Hmm.
idiomorph, what idiomorph does is analyzing the tree, the DOM tree that is in the browser, and compares it with the new DOM tree that you want to render. And it's going to calculate the difference, and it's going to apply only that difference. In practice, that means that only the regions that have changed, get modified in the DOM level. The rest of the tree is preserved. And what you get with that is screen state preservation, which is, in practice, it makes for for smoother and better sensations where you are perceiving those updates. So, for example, a scroll won't be lost. For example, a scroll, any kind of internal scroll you have in your page is going to be preserved. If you have CSS transitions, those are going to be preserved. If you have, I don't know, some caret blinking in some field, it's going to be preserved. So the sensations for you as a user are very good. And more importantly, for you as a programmer, the experience is very good too, because you are just re-rendering everything again. You are not you don't have to care about, I'm going to update this region, this other region, this other region. An algorithm is doing that for you. You just care about
Hmm.
re-rendering everything again.
Right.
So when you were saying, uh, w- when you connect a turbo action, right, to a
Mhm.
DOM ID, like how does that mechanism work under the hood?
Sure. So a turbo stream action, when you render a turbo stream action, you are sending you're sending the HTML of the turbo stream action in the response, right? So that's you're doing that is because Turbo, the library, under the hood, when it's making the request, if you are using Turbo, Turbo is like sending a MIME type. It's setting a MIME type, a special MIME type, which is something about Turbo streams. I don't remember the string, but it's like something about Turbo stream. So it's informing the server that it supports Turbo stream action. The server is responding with a Turbo stream action, and then there is some logic in Turbo that is going to append that to the DOM. It's going to connect that append that to the DOM directly. So under the hood, Turbo is defining some web custom components. In a web component, you can define a tag associated with a JavaScript class that kind of implements several hooks. So that's how it works under the hood. It's like a custom web component that gets connected to the DOM. Then that executes some hooks in the component, and in those hooks, at the end, you place the logic you want. There are different components and different methods to invoke. So that's how they get triggered under the hood.
That's really cool. It
Yep.
reminds me a lot of Live View.
Mm,
And I imagine there's a lot of parallels here, because you did imagine, like, DOM morphing, which I know Live View has had for a while, right? Uh,
yeah,
and so, how are you taking a lot of inspiration from Live View, or, like,
yeah.
from Phoenix, or, have you, like, kind of just, like, adopted your own, like, method at this point?
No, I mean, we definitely, I can explain like the live view was totally something I was, all started. I mean, morphine entered my radar because I was analyzing how live view worked under the hood because I had found a problem. It was early this year. I was working on a new product that the company is going to launch, which is a calendar, a calendar which is going to be a companion for the Hey email service. We are working on a calendar that we are going to ship some point soon.
I keep
And
hearing about it. It looks cool.
yeah, I think it's a pretty cool app. We can't wait to put it out there. So the thing is that I was I mean, we were working on the initial screens, and we get kind of a prototype running pretty quickly for the calendar, like with the basic screens and interactions. And we were using the default body replace approach I was talking about. We were using that for everything, so
Right.
that allowed us to move very fast. But at some point, we needed to add like more fidelity, okay, to the different interactions because this is a calendar. This is the interactivity is very high, and getting these scroll resets and the little blinks, those were not acceptable here. So we were when we were thinking about, are we going to use stream actions for this, like imagine you are an event to a calendar, are we going to respond with a stream action and kind of take care of updating all the things we wanted to update? And it turns out that that was like feeling like not very appealing because rendering in a calendar is incredibly complex, meaning that you have to update like and to account for a lot of considerations, and a lot of logic that a lot of a lot of conditions and a lot of logic that you need to um, well to keep in mind when performing partial screen updates. And that wasn't looking like that was looking like a lot of work, not appealing at all. And then regarding your question, you're spot on. It was like I was thinking like there has to be something out there like can help us. And morphine, I had heard about morphine, but for some reason it wasn't something it was in my radar or in
Hmm.
my toolbox or whatever. But analyzing LiveView, which is a framework, a solution that I find fascinating, um, LiveView, well, it has a very sophisticated rendering pipeline. LiveView is pretty amazing internally. But at the end of the pipeline, it was using this library called Morphdom for applying like LiveView calculates the, the difference in the server. So when you need to update on a screen, LiveView keeps like and it keeps an stateful connection over WebSockets, so it knows what was the previous screen it had served. So it knows the HTML in your browser, and it calculates the difference in the server, and it sends a very optimized payload to the client. And the client, at the end of the pipeline, it was using Morphdom for morphing. And that part regarding Turbo and Rails, that part was like the most appealing to me and the one I saw more applicable because the rest of the live view proposal is kind of a big departure of how the web works with WebSockets, stateful WebSockets connections. And we didn't want to go down that path, um, as fascinating as it is. So we went with Morphdom. We started using Morphdom, and we started experimenting this idea of using Morphdom with Turbo, and eventually we replaced Morphdom with Idiomorph because we found some benefits.
Hmm.
But yeah, LiveView was totally part of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that you didn't go the WebSocket route. It definitely aligns with the Basecamp, philosophy, as far as keeping things as closely adhered to the web standards as they are. WebSockets is still kind of like up in the air, I know, as like a
Yeah.
standard that's acceptable everywhere. So I know, you know, I
Yeah.
know
Well,
Elixir in general is has adopted that socket,
there
which aligns well with the language for sure. Um,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, for doing what Elixir, what LiveView does, like Elixir is a key part of it because yeah, it shines at managing like those that amount of multiplex persistent connections for multiple clients. Still, I've heard it's quite demanding on the resource side, but it's possible. Like, I mean, using exactly the same approach that LiveView in Rails probably wouldn't fly. Well, I don't know, but yeah. But it's also like it's more philosophical. Like also like why we like the web is like when you have like HTTP and a browser that interchanges documents with a server, like there is like a lot of technology built around that paradigm, and you can leverage all that. For example, HTTP caching or all the caching that is possible at the hardware level. If you go with pure WebSockets for everything, like you lost all that. Also, it's like with Turbo, if a client don't support Turbo, or for example, now we are going with page refreshes. Imagine that a client is using Turbo 7 and it doesn't support page refreshes yet. It's a progressive model. Everything will work the same because I mean the experience is going to be degraded, but things are going to be functional, and there is something good there, right? Like philosophically speaking, I think the progressive approach to building traditional web applications that somehow feel faster without you having to change or to use like very different mechanisms is kind of appealing and part of I think 37 Signals DNA. Yeah.
so one thing that I'm curious about because um I mean I know the guys that built like Stimulus Reflex. They used to be hosts on the show. But so they've pulled in a lot of the WebSocket stuff. But yeah, I haven't really adopted it and I haven't seen it pushed, but they did add action cable and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering, is there a world where we kind of live in socket land, or is this
Well,
just something else for
yeah.
another
I mean,
solution
we are
or
we are
for another problem?
using. I mean, we are using WebSockets. Turbo uses WebSockets. For example, with Stream Actions, you can render Stream Actions
Hmm.
either in HTTP responses normally, like as HTTP responses, or you can broadcast them through WebSockets.
Oh,
So
okay.
so that yeah, you can broadcast Stream Actions through WebSockets. And with this page refreshes concept, we are introducing like a new broadcasting mechanism, which is actually a big simplification over broadcasting of stream actions because what you can do now with page refreshes is that you can say, okay, when this model changes, instead of broadcasting like the specific HTML update that we want to perform in certain screen, instead of broadcasting that, we are going to broadcast a generic signal, a generic page refresh signal. And when the browser receives that through WebSockets, it's going to reload the current page using morphing, meaning keeping the state in place and everything, scroll in place and everything. And it's a tremendous simplification compared to what you were doing with Stream Actions. So yes, we are still using WebSockets here for broadcasts, but the backbone of the web application is still HTTP driven, like with server side web documents as responses, HTTP requests as what the browser make. Then you have broadcasting for the very enhanced experience of having different screens getting updated live. But we don't use WebSockets like as the communication backbone for an application. It's like something we leverage that. We use WebSockets. 37 Signals we use. I mean, Action Cable is an extraction from 37 Signals Basecamp 3, I believe. So we definitely use WebSockets and we like them. We just don't see them as like the main. Um, so, for example, as another example, this is also tied to the with the programming model. You're familiar with Rails redirects, right? They have been there since forever.
Hmm.
Like, so
Yep.
you submit a form. This is scaffold code in Rails since forever. Like, you submit a form, you
Right.
persist some information in the database, and you get a redirect response, 302,
Right.
right?
Yeah. To the show action, typically of the thing you're
Yeah,
editing.
the thing is that that makes for an amazing programming model because it's like a very simple mechanism based on standards where you say, okay, when this happens, I want to reuse all the work I did to render that screen because that's something you had to do nevertheless. I mean, you had to spend some time working on how to render that list of invoices or whatever. When you redirect to as a programmer, it's a very simple mechanism, a very simple way, and based on standards of reusing something that exists. So it makes for a very productive workflow. I change something, I redirect, I reuse the initial rendering just like that, and I can move very fast with that programming model. So if you have WebSockets, you don't have that. How do you express that? Like, yeah, you can build abstractions and you can kind of try support similar workflow, I think. But it's like reinventing the wheel because that's something that the browser and the web servers and HTTP as a protocol is perfectly designed to do. You know what I mean? So, uh,
Hmm.
so there are certainly advantages for you as a programmer, I think, in the
Yeah,
programming model.
you make a great point. Like I always wonder, like the caching layer is almost lost with WebSockets in
Yeah,
like the traditional HTTP sense, right? Like there's headers for a reason for cache policies, right? And
claro,
like
exactly.
you could lose a lot of that the more that you like kind of tack on to streamed responses, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. HTTP caching, for example, it works wonderfully well. Browsers support them natively. They are very easy to. It's very easy to do HTTP caching with Rails. So it's something we use in our applications. Like in the calendar application, all the main screens are built with HTTP caching in mind, and then you have like layers of toll caching. But HTTP caching comes first, and you want to leverage all that for sure. Um, and also like I think that for us like the main driving force always is the programming model. Like what's the programming model, where is the programming happiness, how can you be like the most productive? Rails is
Hmm.
designed around that philosophy, and we really put that like at the top of the things that matter. So that's a driving like, okay, you want to do this with WebSockets. What's the programming model here? Can you show us the code? And I make that question with all the libraries I've seen, and I've never seen one that is better than what we are. I mean, this is very subjective, okay? But I haven't seen a programming model that is better than the one we are using right now for the calendar, which is the latest product we are developing. And the programming model we are using for the calendar is the programming model that Rails was using, I don't know, 14 years ago, like
Hmm.
redirect, render, um, resourceful controllers. You know what I mean? So the thing is that it's not like being a purist. It's like, okay, do you have a better idea? How does the code
Right.
look like? And whenever I look at the code, specific code from specific solutions, I never see something that is, oh my god, this is amazing. LiveView was kind of LiveView was for me it was like because it was different and it was like incredibly sophisticated and it was wow. It was this is different. This works. This wow. There's something here. But even with live view, I think the reverse programming model is better, right? In my opinion, but this is super subjective. So it's like using the web for sure and respecting the web, but also you know optimizing for programming happiness. That's also another driving factor here.
I love that you've picked that up from the ethos of Ruby.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Well, that it was David, right? DHH,
Yeah.
DHH like got inspired by Ruby, and it's
Yep.
a core principle in Ruby, core principle in Rails. Like
Yep.
I think it's the first principle in the Rails doctrine. And David always David always refers to Ruby as the inspiration for that. Yeah,
Right.
totally.
So I'm curious. I keep thinking as I'm thinking through programming in Turbo, right? Like as I'm making all these actions and just piecemealing together the HTML, uh, right, kind of in a patchwork fashion on the page. Um, I keep thinking about like third party hooks, right? Or like how does the third party like libraries or third party server like if I want to use a gem that gave a bunch of extras to be available for Turbo in like a gem or something like that. Are there hooks ready for that? How is
Mm,
that like idea
yeah,
getting moving
how this
forward?
plays with, I mean, in general, like if we are talking about client side libraries, JavaScript libraries, what you have to keep in mind is that despite, I mean, something different you get with this approach of page refreshes is the only new thing we are introducing in Turbo 8 in terms of changing how we load documents in the page. It's only page refreshes. So something to keep in mind is that while you are responding with a full HTML document, and while Turbo is performing like a replace navigation internally, you are just changing you're just changing whatever has changed in the screen. Meaning that, for example, imagine that. Well, are you familiar with stimulus, for example? Stimulus,
Yep.
imagine that you had a library that works like a stimulus. Stimulus observes the DOM. Okay, it observes the DOM for mutations, so that when there is a replacement of a div, for example, of an element in the page, stimulus kind of detects that, disconnect the existing controllers and connect the new controllers for the new element. So stimulus can work with content that appears and disappears dynamically in a web page. So
Hmm.
if if your application is depending on such behaviors, you need to be aware that you are not going to get those disconnections now, because when you are morphing, you get those disconnections if you replace the body. You disconnect all the controllers and you get all the controllers again connected. Now you're not going to have that, so you need to be aware that despite of being like a full page rendering operation, you are just updating different regions of the screen. So other than that, I don't think there should be issues with existing libraries or anything like that. I mean, maybe there is, and I just can't think of them, but it shouldn't be like a big problem. Such as, for example, when TurboLinks was released, a lot of the JavaScript libraries wasn't working with it because they were
Right.
relying on full page load events for wiring up the JavaScript, right? So Turbo started to look for workarounds and everything, but things were not quite flowing. So I don't think this is going to be like that at all, because it's like the scope is much smaller. And yeah, but let's see. I mean, we just last week we released like the first beta of Turbo 8, and it's like our main goal is to get people using it, using the library, and reporting real world issues that we haven't been able to anticipate, because it's really impossible to to foresee what's going to go wrong in real world scenarios. So we are all about making this robust. So let's see.
Yeah, I remember the good old days when Turbo Links first came out, and yeah, everybody was turning it off because it broke stuff. Um, but yeah. So do we know when Turbo 8's coming out, or is it more of a question of how much usage you get and how stable it is? Or
Yeah, being stable is going to be a factor for sure. So we just released the first beta. Now we already have like a bunch of reports of things we need to look into,
right,
but we don't have like a deadline for this. We are obviously pushing forward because we want to get this out. Actually, we are already using Turbo 8 in our both products, like both main products so far, which is Hey and Basecamp 4. The Basecamp 4 started using um, Turbo 8 today. We were like in a rollout environment. Now every user is using Turbo 8 in Basecamp 4. Hey has been using Turbo 8 for a while. And so we are pretty confident that it's production ready. Now we want to offer a great experience, and we want to fix all the rough bugs that we hear about. So we don't have a deadline, but it should be a matter of weeks. We are also like quite busy with the products we are working on in a company. We don't have like a dedicated team for Turbo or anything like that. It's always programmer working on product and open source. So we don't have like maybe the same bandwidth that if you I don't know, spend all your weeks doing open source. But we are optimistic it should be a matter of a few, very few weeks to get the official release out there.
Awesome. I guess the other question I have, because I've been looking through like the Turbo Handbook
Mhm.
um beforehand, but
Yeah, and it's not.
I just it doesn't walk me through exactly what to do with it. Like it gives examples, hey, this is generally what it does.
Yeah, I
So I'm just
agree.
wondering if you have a walkthrough that you like or a tutorial or something that I can go check out.
You know, many people have complained about that. Well, first of all, the documentation for the new stuff is still pending. We need to write it, and it's totally. I mean,
Right.
we are not going to ship this without documentation. We are going to document that. But you're on point. I think you are totally right that the documentation is kind of missing. Like, kind of. I totally can see how for a junior programmer who lands at the page or something, it's like, what's Turbo? How do I use this? Or this many different pieces. Like it's missing like a tutorial that tells the full story and the motivation and how you should progressively enhance and use one thing or use the other. Um, I would love to make that happen. And now that I'm a little bit more involved in Turbo, I'll see if I can help with that because I totally. I mean, I've heard that story like several times in the last 2 weeks from people
Hmm.
saying they are missing that, and it makes sense to me. Like, of course, because for me it's so obvious after a few years working with all of
Right.
this. But yeah, as a newcomer, and actually, I think it's so necessary to do that because I think Turbo uh, and Hotwire in general doesn't have like the mm, the good press it needs. It needs. I think it's a wonderful solution in the front end
Yeah.
space. I think it's the best solution in the front end space actually, because it takes into consideration programming happiness, or it considers it like the most important factor. So I would love I love if we would do a better job selling it, like
Hmm.
telling its story better, and I think it would be in great benefit. So I hope that I can dedicate some focus to do that, or we can dedicate some resources and focus on doing that after launching what we have to launch in the coming weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I have the same complaint about Kamal. I've switched
Mm,
my deployment over to Kamal, and yeah, the rub was just okay. I changed this, and now it's not working, and why? And there's not a whole lot of um, discussion there. There is a Discord for Kamal that I found where people were
mm,
pretty helpful. But anyway, yeah, it'd be really cool to see um, better documentation on some of that. But
yeah. From here, like we are always like this is all open source. So if anyone listening to
yeah,
this experience want to contribute documentation to the project, everything is open source, including the documentation site. So you can bet that good documentation pull requests will be like super highly appreciated. But
yep,
I agree. We need to improve in that. Yeah,
yep.
in that direction.
So I guess the other question that I have is, um, yeah. So if I want to start implementing this, should I wait for Turbo 8 or should I start putting in Turbo 7 stuff now and then, when I
Um,
update, it'll be pretty closely compatible the features that are in right now or
no, we are not introducing any breaking changes here in the sense that
okay.
if you start with Turbo with the current Turbo 7 version and
Mhm.
then you want to start leveraging the new system, it's going to be totally fine. Um, what I would recommend, I mean, if you are, it depends on how conservative you want to be with your technological choices. Maybe you want, if definitely you want like something very very stable, wait until official release. But as I said, we're using Turbo 8 on very widely used in two widely used applications, and it's working fine. So it's production ready right now. If you want to use the new stuff, the page refreshes, you might find bugs and issues because it's not as battle tested yet. Um,
Right.
I'd say that, I mean, if you're starting something now, I would go with the beta Turbo 8 and use it. But if you're running like if you're running like an application with millions of users such as Basecamp, and you want to be a little bit more careful, it's also fine to wait, I guess. But for you to
Right.
know, we are using Turbo 8 in Basecamp.
So what's on the roadmap? I'm
Uh,
curious. Like I know you're focusing on Turbo 8 release, right? But
you
what all is planned? Like once that's out, right? Like, is there a next step, or is it kind of just like stabilizing?
mm, well, I've heard. In terms of I mean it, the roadmap right now is shipping the product, stabilizing things. Like I can't think much further than that. Like there's so much to do there. Like we don't have like big. The thing is, you know what, the thing is that normally it's something I had heard and I have experienced firsthand. It's like most of the ideas in the company appear when we work on new products. So right now we are working on these products. We have developed like some technology around them. Then we are going to put this out there, and I think that the work will tell what we work on next. But we don't have like big things in the roadmap that I have in mind or that I can share. That's the plan is getting shipping, making this robust, and getting to void through the door.
Good deal. Well, let's go ahead and did you have another question, Valentino?
Oh, I mean, I I have a lot of questions on how Jorge manages his open source and day job at the same time.
Yeah, do it.
Sure, please.
Yeah, I mean, how is it possible? No. Uh,
Well,
I'm
um,
curious what your process like. Do you have like a weekly schedule or something? Like, how do you decide like how to weigh your time as far as the
um,
open source and
well,
company stuff?
I'm not a huge open source contributor either, to be honest. I've done some. Well, in my case, my major open source contributions, which are Active Record Encryption and now this Turbo 8, which I've collaborated with Alberto, who also works at 37 Signals and has contributed a lot to Turbo 8. Um, we do that, as part of our jobs. So
Hmm.
at 37 Signals, they give you like a lot of autonomy to do whatever you want. So when I was working on the calendar, I started to play with this idea, and I kind of discussed this idea with David and some other folks. I kind of prepared some prototypes. I was doing that on my job during my job time, like during my work time. Sorry. Um, so it's not like I'm have to balance a lot of things. Something challenging is that you need to, I mean, we are a product company, so of course there are expectations for us to have certain throughput when it comes to the products we are working on. Like I can't spend like 4 months working on this Turbo 8 idea and don't work on the calendar, which is the project I've been working on this year, because that doesn't fly. But they give you a lot of autonomy for you to organize. So what I try to do is to keep a balance. Like when also I got so excited with this morphine thing that I kind of jumped onto it, but at the same time I was dedicating some time every day to work on the calendar, on the features we had to work on. So for a while I was compaginating both, but I don't think it's like a big feat. Like I think there are. It's way harder for people that do this, on their free time. Like they have like their daily jobs, and then on their free time, they make these tremendous open source contributions. That's not my case. I'm doing this as part of my job. So but I definitely try to balance both. And for active record encryption, unlike this Turbo 8 thing, this of page refreshes, active record encryption was like my main project for several weeks or for a couple of months or something like that. So I was working on that, and then we open source it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've definitely taken advantage of it.
Yeah, I broke top end devs the other day actually with active record encryption
Oh,
because I
really?
turned it on and I pulled in solid cache
Okay.
and solid cache. So the cache, so it does the lookup, and then what it pulls out of the database is a value call or a column called value.
Yeah.
And the there's another gem I was using that does settings, and that settings one also has a column called value. And so when you put in the initializer, it says active support, onload, solid cache, store, encrypt value. So it encrypted the value column on both tables.
Mm.
And I already had unencrypted data in there. And so it went, I I can't unencrypt this. And so I had to turn off the encryption on the cache, and then it worked. But
Okay.
yeah, anyway.
There is a setting in active record encryption which is support unencrypted data. I think it's like config support
Uh-huh.
unencrypted data, and if you enable that, it's going to work with both unencrypted and encrypted data. I'm not sure if that was your problem here, but by
That
default
could
with
have been.
active record encryption, when you enable it, it it thinks that everything must be encrypted. So if you want to make it compatible with both encrypted and unencrypted, there is a flag, a setting that you can configure.
Oh, see, I thought when
And
you turned it on, it only encrypted the things you told it to encrypt.
sorry, what? When you
I thought when you turned on active record encryption that it only encrypted the stuff that you told it to encrypt.
yeah, when you yeah,
So
that's
you
correct.
say
But
encrypt this
but
column on,
yeah,
yeah.
but if you have if you turn active record encryption on and you declare like an attribute to be encrypted, if you
Uh-huh.
try to read a model with that attribute that is not encrypted, it's going to raise an error.
Yeah.
So the
I
expectation is that
know.
yeah, the expectation is that if you have data, yeah. So probably maybe we should change the default there. That it's like safer to expect that everything must be encrypted. By the way,
No,
did you
it's
did you solve
makes
your
sense.
problem? Yeah, you solve it by disabling,
I
right?
by turning it off, yeah.
Okay,
Which
cool.
is fine. I mean, I'm like most of the stuff that I'm caching is stuff that it's like, hey, here's a video page, or hey, here's a podcast page. So none of it's I'm not putting PII in there. So
Yeah. And now that you mentioned solid cache, regarding your question of what's coming, my colleague Rosa Gutierrez, who also works at 37 Signals, she's working on a very exciting project, which is Solid Queue, um,
mhm.
which is like a jobs queue software, kind of like Sidekick, but that runs
Yeah.
on regular databases. And it's she's cooking like some pretty cool stuff there, some pretty cool features, and I'm pretty excited about it. So
I think I
uh,
went to the Rails World talk on that one, and I'm pretty excited for it.
yeah, well, that
So,
was that was Solid Cache. Yeah, Rosa didn't talk in Rails World, but that was Solid
oh,
Cache by Donald. Donald worked on Solid
yeah,
Cache.
I interviewed Donald at Rails World, but
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
maybe
Yeah,
it was just when David talked about it in his keynote.
yeah. David talked about in the keynote, and I'm not sure what's the when it's the release date, but I'm seeing it internally how it's cooked and the features that Rosa is putting in, and I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah,
And also, it's going to remove like the need for Redis, which is pretty big. Like for
yeah,
it's pretty big, a pretty big thing I think in
yeah.
terms of operations and simplification for a lot of shops.
That
So,
that's where I got hung up on Kamal, is I didn't put a Redis accessory in to begin with,
mm,
and I didn't realize that because when I added it, then I tell it to deploy, and it wouldn't set it up. I didn't realize that you had to run the accessory commands
mm,
to stand it up. But once it did, it worked great. And then on Dave Kimura's recommendation, I just put the Melee search
mm,
because I've been adding full text search to top end devs, which is really
okay,
nice, by the way. It's like, what was that episode where we talked about the thing, and then go find it
okay,
now. But yeah, same deal, right? And so I knew then that if I added it and I wanted it up and ready for my app to use, I had to tell it to stand up the accessory and then deploy. So
mm.
anyway, very cool. If people want to check in with you, Jorge, where do they find you?
I think the best place is my personal page, Jorge. It's my name, jorgemanrubia.com. And I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, but I think that's a best place to start. Yeah.
Very cool. Valentino, did you have other questions? I kind of jumped in the middle of that.
I mean, I do, but for another time.
All right, sounds good.
Y-
Maybe we'll have to have you back, Jorge.
Sure. Whenever you want, folks.
All right, well, let's go ahead and do our picks. Valentino, do you have some picks?
Sure. Let's see. I had something open here. uh, well, I'm just gonna pick my Edge AI kit that I got from Particle. That's what was
Okay.
causing all of the noise earlier. But it's really fun. It's got a bunch of like connectors and things for the new particle related chips that are coming out the Photon 2, and they have an amazing pipeline now that let you like over the air update the device and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I'm playing with their AI kit, which is kind of wild. Lets you run a lot of AI stuff on the device. And so I have a little microphone hooked up to it with a voice server. I'm gonna hook up to automatically submit my OpenAI responses to. So far so
Okay.
good. It's a lot
That's
of fun.
amazing. Are you into? Are you a lot into AI, like
Yeah,
developing stuff?
I've been into it a lot.
Nice,
Way too
nice,
much.
nice, nice.
But I can't help myself.
That's good. That's cool.
Cool stuff. Yeah, that's something I want to get into some more. I'm going to throw out a few picks of my own here. The first one that I'm going to pick is a game. Um, I don't I don't remember which games I picked. I need to just make myself a list. But I'm going to pick a game. I think it's called Happy Little Dinosaurs. Yeah, Happy Little Dinosaurs. Um, it is a very simple game. If you are kind of a hardcore board game person like me, then this is probably not going to be the game you play with your friends. This is going to be the game you play with your kids. It has a board game geek weight of 1.38. And the way that it works is you each play a different dinosaur. And so you have a little card in front of you, and then you have a little track that keeps track of your score. And there are different calamities that are coming. So I think they're red, blue, green, and meteors. And meteors are wilds. And so you're eliminated if you get three of a kind or three of each kind, right? And so if you have a red, a green, and a meteor, that counts as three, one of each kind. So then you're out. Um, for each calamity that you have happen to you, and you keep those on your card, you get to move up an extra space, or you get a point at the end of each round. And then the way you do it is you put a card down face down, and the highest number wins. So the different dinosaurs have different advantages. One of them has a +1 against meteors. I think one of them has a +1 against red and a -1 against green. And so anyway, so they kind of vary that way. So you can play up to 4 players, and so you put the cards face down. Some of the cards have effects, right? So some of them will let you swap numbers with somebody else, or play another card, or all kinds of things, right? And so, or cancel the effects of all the other cards. Anyway, so I mean, it's a really simple game. Um, and yeah, it's something that I'd play with my 8-year-old or my 12-year-old. Um, but yeah, it's not a very complicated game, and you can play a half hour. But yeah, so if you're looking for a game to play with your kiddos, that is one that I would recommend. I'll go ahead and put some links in. I'll put an affiliate link in for Amazon too if you want to. It doesn't change the price for you, but it gives me a little kickback if you buy it. Um, and then the other pick I have, and this is, like I said, I mentioned Ruby Geniuses before. And so there are two parts to this. One of them is the video screencast component, which is going to be kind of like your Go Rails or Drifting Ruby. I want to do something a little different. I don't want to just walk through, here's how you do this thing, or here's how you use this library. what I want to do is I want to do more of a here's how you add this feature to your Rails app, right? And so I'm going to build a Rails app. I'm going to build it front to back. I might skip some of the more mundane stuff. Oh, I'm generating another controller, right? But I'll pull in, kind of the critical pieces and say, okay, this is how I would build this, or this is how I would use this library to accomplish this if I'm pulling in a gem. And so I'm going to be putting those out every week. And then, and this is all down to what Top End Devs is about, which is helping you build your skills, helping you build your network, and helping you build your personal brand so that you can build a career that gets you what you want in life. Right. So that's your skills. And then Rails Geniuses at the membership level we're gonna have at least 3 calls per week or per month. And so one of them is going to be like a Q&A. I might bring somebody in. I might bring Jorge in and say, hey, we've got Jorge coming and he can talk about active record encryption and turbo and, list some of the things that they can ask questions about. Or I may just answer some of the questions myself or whatever, right? We'll have a networking call as one of those calls, right? So we'll get into breakout groups. We'll talk to each other for 5 minutes or so, get to know each other a little bit and then switch. The reason that I'm interested in this is because what I found is most of the opportunities I had both to grow and to find better positions have come out of my network. And then for building the personal brand, there will be at least one other call that's for all of the different. So I'm doing JavaScript, Ruby, and React geniuses. There will be an overall call that is more on the how do I build a personal brand. So it'll be how do I grow my podcast? How do I grow my YouTube channel? How do I get started with the podcast? How do I get started with the YouTube channel? How do I build my resume? How do I contribute to open source? Right. And so it's all these things that will help you get noticed out there in the world. So that's what I'm putting together. If you go to rubygeniuses.com, it should be up here within the next 2 weeks. And then you'll get access and you'll be able to see when the calls are. You should be able to see when the calls are anyway. I'm just going to put them on the calendar, but you'll get the links to join and, all of those things. And if you want access to all of the above, there'll be an overall membership that includes all of those geniuses levels. But yeah, that's what I'm working on. And then I've had a few people ask me about coaching. And so if you go to topenddevs.com/coaching, there will be information on the coaching levels and how to apply. Beyond that, um, I just bought myself my Christmas present. It's funny. My wife's like, what do you want? And it's always something expensive. So last year, I think it was last year, I got my smoker, my Traeger, which I dearly love. This year, I got a Wahoo Core trainer for my bike. And so I'm going to be training for half Ironman this next year. And so I'm pretty excited about that. So I'm going to pick that. It comes with a 1-year subscription to Zwift, which is, it projects like a trail on the TV, and then it actually connects to um, your trainer through your phone. And so it'll adjust. So if you're riding up a hill, it'll actually make it harder for you to ride. And so then you can shift gears and stuff like that. So anyway, those are my picks. Jorge, what are your picks?
So my picks, I'm going with two. When is this new feature in Chat GPT of creating like customized Chat GPT instances? I think it calls them like Chat GPTs, like your Chat GPTs. And I know that before you could like enter these preambles for your prompts, but this is kind of nicer, and I'm digging it a lot for Rails API programming API questions. Like you can have like your um, custom ChatGPT where you can give some guidelines about how you want the replies to be. And kind of I'm finding the feature useful. That's my point, and that saves me time. And another pick is another video game, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which I'm
Mhm.
playing to with my daughter. One of my daughters is 7 years old, and I played to Breath of the Wild with her like back a couple of years ago, and now we are enjoying it a lot. It's like Breath of the Wild, but multiplied by I don't know 10
Yeah.
in all directions. So it's like
Right?
if you liked Breath of the Wild, this is like wow. The thing is that I think I'm going to be playing it for the next 5 years, something like that, because we
Right.
play a little bit at a time, and the game is huge, but it's so good, so good.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I started playing it, and you start in the sky, and then you get down to ground level, and you realize that yeah, you're basically there are 3 maps. There's one in the
Yeah,
sky, one above you, and one below you underground.
yeah,
And it oh wow, it is so expansive. It doesn't end. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's
really,
nice.
really loving that game. So yeah. And then yeah, we put a link to your website in the comments on Facebook and YouTube. So
Okay.
people can pick it up that way. But thanks for coming, Jorge. This was fun.
Thank you so much for having me, folks. It was my pleasure.
All right. We'll wrap it up. Till next time, folks. Max out.